Star Wars 7x7, episode 2748. All right, today is the last of our 2022 previews, and we are covering the last 3 topics we usually cover in monthly episodes, but with an annual focus that we haven't yet talked about for the big annual review. And that would include merchandise, experiential, and comics. Punch it. Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod, and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy. And thank you so much for joining me for it. All right, so let's do as we've done with the last couple and start with the one that's easiest to knock out, which is merchandise. And we really don't know much about that at all. Well, maybe a little bit. Okay, so here's what we do know about merchandise, and it ties into what we're going to talk about next, which is some of the experiential stuff. The Galactic Star Cruiser opens in Florida in March to the general public. There'll be some initial voyages in February, but there's going to be merchandise that is specific to that experience, and so that will start becoming available in March as well. So there's one merchandise thing that we know about already, and there were previews of it earlier in 2021. And then as far as other merchandise things go, well, now that we are starting to get more information about the Book of Boba Fett, for example, I think a Black Chrysanthemum action figure can't be too far behind, and I'm just selecting that character as one example of the fact that as we learn more about the secrets of the Book of Boba Fett, we are also going to see more of that stuff appear in merchandise. And the same probably goes for the Kenobi series, for the Bad Batch Season 2, for the Andor series, and leading up to Season 3 of The Mandalorian. In fact, they seem to do one big kind of merchandise event almost every year for all intents and purposes, and the Bring Home the Bounty thing they did in 2021 was just the latest example of that. I mean, they did stuff just about every year leading up to the release of the movies that they put out, and yeah, it's not just that. There's been other stuff too, especially with another experiential thing we're going to be talking about, Star Wars Celebration, and usually there are exclusives related to that event as well. So it's bound to be a merchandising bonanza this year with a couple of the experiential events happening and with all of the new content that is being released this year. Now, since I've already cracked the seal on the experiential stuff, let's talk about that. So the Galactic Star Cruiser experience opens on March 1st for the general public and is apparently already sold out for, a while ahead, which is great. Congratulations to them on that. So we're going to start seeing the first reactions to this, the first public experiences, the first public reviews, if you will, and we're probably also going to get the first YouTube videos for this. People are going to be posting on YouTube, on TikTok, on Instagram, their experiences and the things that they're encountering on there. So we're going to start to get an idea of what the story situation is with this whole experience, thanks to the magic of social media. So even if you don't have the ability to go there just yet, like myself, for example, then don't worry, you won't necessarily have to miss out on whatever storytelling is happening. All right, the next big experiential thing related to Star Wars is Star Wars Celebration, happening at the Anaheim Convention Center, currently slated for May 26th through 29th of 2022. That is during Memorial Day weekend. And I'm hoping that they will be able to pull this off, that the world will stop being on fire to a degree where they can actually pull this event off. Right now, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer about this, but there are some not so encouraging signs of where things are going right now. There's a website called fancon.com that tracks a bunch of fandom related conventions, I guess as many as they are across all sorts of things in the US, and of the 28 events they listed in January, 7 of them have either been postponed or canceled. That's one thing. There's an event that is supposed to happen during Valentine's Day weekend, which is the Long Beach Comic Expo. That event has been postponed, and so, it's making me a little nervous. The next one that I think I'm keeping an eye on for announcements is Wondercon, which is supposed to take place at the Anaheim Convention Center in April 1st through 3rd, so we'll see how that comes through. And Celebration was actually scheduled to be in August of 2022, but it got moved, and I believe the reason why it got moved was because of the D23 Expo. So back in September of 2020, Disney announced that the D23 Expo, which was going to be held in the summer of 21, would then be moved to September 9th through 11th of 22. And so it was about 8 months later that Star Wars Celebration announced that they were moving their event from August of 22, which would have made it less than a month before the D23 Expo. They were moving it a little bit earlier, moving it to the end of May, so that way now we have Celebration at the end of May, and we have the D23 Expo also at the Anaheim Convention Center in the beginning of September, September 9th through 11th. And whereas there are not as many big Star Wars news and announcements at D23 as there are at Celebration, there's usually something pretty big. So yeah, something to keep an eye on as well. And last but not least, let's talk about the comic book situation. So there's not necessarily a heck of a lot there that we know about for sure. They've only announced solicitations through March, which means that we have an idea of what the comic situation is going to look like for the first quarter of the year. One thing that they've also announced is that there will be a new ongoing series called Han Solo and Chewbacca, which is going to be set a few years, quote unquote, before the events of A New Hope, which would also make it a few years after the events of Solo, a Star Wars story. And it starts with them trying to do a job for Jabba the Hutt, which goes comically, horribly awry to some degree that we don't know just yet. And somehow they're working with Greedo on this one. So this is, I guess, before the bad times when Han had to shoot poor Greedo in the cantina. We also know, though we haven't gotten official details about it, that there will be a sequel to War of the Bounty Hunters / Crimson Reign. So Charles Soule wrote a trilogy, basically, or had in mind a trilogy. He's probably working on part 3 right now. But War of the Bounty Hunters, that series that we talked about in the lead up to our discussions about the Book of Boba Fett, that was just the first part of the trilogy. Crimson Reign is a new 5-issue limited series that is out focused on Kira and Crimson Dawn, and it's only the second part of a trilogy, so there's a third series that's going to come out later in 2022 that we don't yet know details about. As far as the High Republic goes, we know that the Marvel run of the High Republic is coming to an end, I believe after issue 15, and will be coming back in October, in some fashion. We don't know whether that holds true for the High Republic Adventures just yet, but what we do know is that starting this month we're getting a 2-shot, so a 2-issue limited series called Eye of the Storm, which focuses on the backstory of Marchion Ro, and we're also going to conclude the Trail of Shadows limited series by Daniel Jose Older. And then probably the biggest comic news of 2021 after its fashion is that Dark Horse Comics is going to come back into the comic publication fold. Dark Horse, of course, had the license for Star Wars comics prior to the purchase of Lucasfilm by Disney and the rebooting of the canon and whatnot. And so, the license transferred over to Marvel makes sense because Disney owns Marvel, of course, right? So why wouldn't they? But Dark Horse is now going to join the fold again, and according to the news that was announced about it not too long ago, at the very least, they're going to have one ongoing series and one anthology series, and they say they're going to mix some one-shots and specials in there, and that they are going to be focusing primarily on the High Republic to begin, but that their storytelling is open to the entirety of the Star Wars timeline. So prequels, original trilogy, sequel trilogy era stuff, as well as the High Republic, that is all on the table for Dark Horse, and there's more to come about that in the spring of 2022. Those are basically all the big headline news events in the comics world, in the experiential world, and in the merchandise world that we yet know about for Star Wars and for Lucasfilm for 2022. Of course, as news breaks on all of those, we will be covering them here on the show. And so that is going to complete our look at what's to come for Star Wars storytelling in 2022 across all of these major storytelling categories, and that is going to do it for this episode of the podcast as well. It just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for it, as always, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.
7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2021 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.